Hello everyone, David here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes national, international and business, economy, news. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. June 15, 2021. Important national news. G7 accommodates Indian stand on need for internet curbs Open Society's statement reworked to prioritize national security over freedoms. Special Correspondent New Delhi. Internet freedoms are subject to national security, said government sources, claiming that India's tough negotiations on the joint communiqué issued by G7 and guest countries at the session on open societies had ensured that the original language criticizing internet shutdowns was amended to include New Delhi's concerns. The explanation came after the G7 and guest countries' 2021 Open Societies statement referred to politically motivated internet shutdowns, which indirectly addresses internet blackouts in various parts of the world including India. Kashmir has experienced internet and mobile telephony shutdown since Article 370 was amended on August 5, 2019. Similar communication shutdowns were witnessed in Delhi and Assam during the protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act during 2019 to 2020 and the farmers' protest last January. Communication shutdowns were also witnessed in other parts of the world, including Hong Kong, where a protest against Chinese security laws intensified during 2019. The G7 statement also took note of the developments in military-ruled Myanmar as well as in larger economies. We are at a critical juncture, facing threats to freedom and democracy from rising authoritarianism, electoral interference, corruption, economic coercion, manipulation of information, including disinformation, online harms and cyber attacks, politically motivated internet shutdowns, human rights violations and abuses, terrorism and violent extremism, declared the statement, referring to the problems facing the democratic world. The assertion in the statement appears to touch upon several issues that are sensitive in nature as they are often subjected to public debate in India. Sources indicated that the mention of the topics in the statement took place in the backdrop of a sustained exchange of opinions between G7 and Indian teams. Public safety. The statement went on to say that the G7 and guest countries would promote respect for internationally accepted norms that drive inclusivity and protect digital civic space, including through capacity building, and ensure that the design and application of new technologies reflect our shared values, respect human rights and international law, promote diversity, and embed principles of public safety. Government sources said that politically motivated internet shutdowns clarified that national security and public order concerns are an exception to the need for internet freedoms. According to the sources, during his visit to London in early May, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar fielded questions about the government's actions against protesters and the clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir after August 5, 2019. The sources said Mr. Jaishankar made it clear that law and order concerns were important and public safety had to be prioritized when regulating the flow of information. He also fielded questions about the internet shutdown for months in Jammu and Kashmir, as well as during the Republic Day protests by farmers in Delhi this year. Mr. Jaishankar attended the meetings virtually as he was under quarantine in London. The G7 foreign ministers level statement issued earlier in May, however, also referred to internet shutdowns as a subject that the organization would counter. Government report flags lapses in Nagaland BAT study role of foreign authors under lens, amid sample storage row. Suhasini Haidar Bindu Shajan Puropadan New Delhi. More than a year after a probe into a filovirus study of bats in Nagaland by the Bengaluru-based National Centre for Biological Sciences, NCBS, and the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR, the government has concluded that there had been concerning lapses in the conduct and protocols followed for the study, even as an interdepartment row continues over where the bat samples should be stored. The Hindu had first reported in February 2020 on the inquiry being initiated into whether adequate permissions had been sought for the study that had listed 2 scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology as co-authors, and was partially funded by the U.S. Department of Defense through its Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. In 2020, a committee convened by the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, which consisted of officials from the Ministries of External Affairs, Defense, Home Affairs, Health, Environment, Law, Departments of Science and Technology, Development of the Northeastern Region, and others met to streamline processes and avoid such lapses in the future, a report by the Ministry of Health said. Both the foreign funding of the study, which cost an estimated 1 Indian rupee and 90 cents crore, as well as concerns over the storage of the bat samples collected came up for scrutiny. No Wuhan link. The findings of the report became significant given the debate over the origins of COVID-19 worldwide, and handling of bat samples at the Wuhan Institute laboratory. However, scientific experts and officials that the Hindu spoke to made it clear that the Nagaland bat study on filoviruses, Ebola and Marburg, was in no way related to the coronavirus, SARS, studies at Wuhan. When contacted, NCVS Director Satyajit Mayer said he had no knowledge of the Health Ministry's report's conclusions. Rajasthan government to set up Vedic Education Board CONG had promised it in its manifesto. Special Correspondent Jaipur. The Congress government in Rajasthan will set up a Vedic Education and Sanskar Board to revive the knowledge of ancient Sanskrit scriptures and connect the learnings of the Vedas with science and yoga. The board is likely to be set up in the coming 4 to 5 months. Minister of State for Sanskrit Education Subhash Garg said here on Monday that a committee appointed to define the aims, objectives, and functioning of the board had submitted its report to the state government. Based on the panel's recommendations, the board will adopt education modules revolving around Vedic knowledge. The ruling Congress had promised the establishment of the Vedic Education and Sanskar Board as well as steps to promote Sanskrit language and education in its manifesto for the 2018 State Assembly election. CM's announcement. Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot had announced in January this year that the work for setting up the board would be expedited to encourage the students to carry out research on the Vedas and enable them to assimilate the country's glorious traditions. He had pointed out that Ayurveda and Sanskrit universities had also been established in the state during the tenure of the Congress government earlier. The committee has reportedly studied several models of Vedic teaching being followed in other states and recommended a curriculum for schools, which would include subjects such as science, mathematics, Sanskrit, yoga, and meditation. Retail inflation at 6.3%, a 6-month high. Special Correspondent New Delhi. Rising fuel and edible oil costs sent India's wholesale prices inflation soaring to a record 12.94% in May, up from 10.5% in April, and nudged retail inflation to a 6-month high of 6.3%, going past the central bank's tolerance threshold of 6%. Consumers experienced an inflation of 11.58% for the fuel and light category in May, with urban India bearing a bigger hit of 14.24% on the same account. Food inflation reheated to 5.1% from just 1.96% in April. Rating agency ICRA reckoned that core inflation, without factoring in food and fuel prices, also hit an 83-month high of 6.6%. Overall retail prices saw a sharper spurt in rural areas from 3.75% in April to 6.5% in May. AAP will contest all seats in Gujarat. Poll. Kejriwal alleges BJP and Congress playing a fixed match in the state to trick voters. Delhi CM Arvind Kejriwal offering prayers at a temple in Ahmedabad on Monday. PTI. Special Correspondent Ahmedabad. Delhi Chief Minister and convener of the Aam Aadmi Party, AAP, Arvind Kejriwal on Monday said his party will contest all seats in the Gujarat Assembly election next year. Mr. Kejriwal said AAP would provide a real alternative to the people of Gujarat while visiting a temple in Ahmedabad. He inducted popular TV anchor Isudan Gadhavi into the party. AAP will contest each and every seat in the 2022 Gujarat Assembly elections. AAP is a credible alternative to the BJP and the Congress. Gujarat will change soon, he said. In the past 1 year during the pandemic, Gujarat has been treated like an orphan. Today, the youth are unemployed, Farmers are committing suicide and children are struggling to get admission in schools and colleges. Even businessmen and traders are scared, he said at the Vallabhsadan temple. The AAP leader slammed both the ruling BJP and the opposition Congress for the plight of the state and said the two parties were playing a fixed match to trick the voters. Gujarat is suffering because of the friendly alliance between them. The BJP has been in power in the state for the last 27 years. I heard people saying that the Congress is in the pocket of the BJP. Both parties are the same here, as whenever the BJP is in trouble, the Congress provides help. Credible alternative. He said AAP would prove to be a real and credible alternative to the ruling BJP in Gujarat, as its performance in Delhi is a testimony. The people of Gujarat want to know why the electricity costs are so high here when it's free in Delhi. If government-run schools and hospitals are top class in Delhi, why are they non-functional in Gujarat? The time has come to change Gujarat. Mr. Kejriwal had last visited Surat in February when his party emerged as the main opposition after the civic body elections. AAP had made inroads into Gujarat politics by winning 27 seats in the 120-member Surat Municipal Corporation. The party has been working across the state, preparing for the assembly polls. Summer effect at Singhu. Farmers start collecting milk from villages. Group of protesters make rounds, bring hundreds of liters of milk to agitation site. Farmers seen protesting at the Singhu border in Delhi. Sushil Kumar Verma, Hemani Bhandari, New Delhi. With the summer at its peak, the availability of milk for consumption of protesting farmers has gone down. They have now resorted to collecting the dairy product from other villages. Why the shortage? Komaldeep Singh Chima, a resident of Dubba, has been a part of the protests since the beginning. He said because of summers, the cattle are producing less milk and is leading to a limited supply from Haryana. As a result, Mr. Chima and a few others from the district have decided to collect milk for the consumption of farmers at the protest. Those from Punjab don't prefer packaged or powdered milk. Most of them fall sick if they consume it. This essentially has made us decide to take up this initiative, he said. Mr. Komaldeep said announcements are being made in 5 villages since June 2nd, asking people to donate milk for the protesters. Some people gave a liter while others gave 2. Some even donated liters, and some gave a bucket full of milk. In one of the 5 villages, people donated more than 450 liters, he added. Milk collected over 4 days was kept in an ice-making unit for preservation. The group then started for Singhu border from Dubba on June 6. We finally collected 750 liters, put it in a water tanker with lots of ice, and covered it with wet sacks, he said. At the protest site, they drive across the lengthy stretch distributing milk to people and those running Langar services. The Kheer Langar, which was running for months, stopped a while ago because of milk shortage and also the dishes being perishable. The group made 2 rounds from the villages to Singhu and is set to make its 3rd round to the protest site. Mr. Komaldeep said that after she shared his initiative on social media, people from Canada and the UK have called him to extend help. Help pours in. A man called me from the UK and asked how we were transporting the milk. When I explained we were taking it in water tankers, he said he'll send 1 Indian rupee and 50 cents lakh for a special tanker to be built for milk. Another person called from Canada and extended help for unlimited petrol for the journey, Mr. Chima said. Another initiative taken at the protest site is Kisan Express, a trolley fitted with seats for people to be transported from their lodging to the stage. The initiative was taken by Life Care Foundation, Kisan Aid, and Swak Kisan Morcha. The reason Kisan Express has been started is to increase the number of people coming to the stage area. Because of heat and mostly the elderly staying here, it became important for them to have a vehicle for commute, said After Singh, who runs a makeshift hospital at the protest site. He added that the battery rickshaw was proving to be expensive and less efficient. Delhi government's claim on ONORT misleading, Centre tells SC ration card portability dependent on EPOS machines. Legal correspondent, New Delhi. The central government maintained in the Supreme Court that the Delhi government's claim to have launched One Nation One Ration Card, ONORT, scheme was misleading. The claim of Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi regarding launch of One Nation One Ration Card ONORT plan in NCT of Delhi is misleading, as they claim to have implemented it only in Circle 63 Simapuri. Only a handful of transactions conducted in a single circle with about 42 electronic points of sale, EPOS, machines cannot be considered as implementation of ONORC, the center submitted before the court. The center, represented by Additional Solicitor General Ashvarya Bhatti, observed that the implementation of the ONORC would require national portability transactions to be rolled out formally in all the fair price shops of all the circles of Delhi in which more than 2,000 EPOS, electronic point of sale, machines had been supplied and were waiting for operation. It is pertinent to appreciate that a very large number of interstate migrants are present across Delhi, such as migrant workers, street dwellers, rag pickers, migratory laborers, construction workers, rickshaw pullers, auto/taxi drivers, and others, who do not have access to their National Food Security Act food grains, the center said. None of these economically marginalized population, who were away from their native villages and towns, were able to access their quota of subsidized food commodities assured to them under the Food Security Act, it stated. There is no full implementation of the ONORC and reporting of such transaction/distribution details of NFSA/BG food grains on the central portal/dashboards, it noted. The onus of implementing the ONORC was on the states. While most states were implementing it, Assam, Chhattisgarh, Delhi and West Bengal have not yet integrated into the scheme. Their integration would depend on their technical readiness to implement the portability of ration cards, it pointed out. The center's submissions came despite Delhi's stand that it was implementing the ONORC scheme. Recently, Food Secretary Sudhanshu Pandey had written to the Delhi government to resume the use of EPOS machines at ration shops. He said at least 10 lakh migrant workers, who had ration cards in their home states, would be able to access subsidized food grains in the capital. Ration card portability under the ONORC scheme is dependent on EPOS machines, as they use Aadhaar-linked biometric authentication to verify the identity and entitlement of beneficiaries even if they are not registered at that particular shop. Delhi had suspended the use of EPOS in early 2018, after widespread complaints of poor network leading to authentication failures and exclusion of genuine beneficiaries. COVID, Child Rights Panel to identify children for relief. Special Correspondent Jaipur. The Rajasthan State Commission for Protection of Child Rights will render assistance to voluntary groups in the identification of children who have lost their parents to the COVID-19 infection, for a financial relief package announced by the state government. The orphans will get an ex gratia of 1 Indian rupee lakh each, followed by a financial assistance every month. Commission Chairperson Sangeeta Benival said here on Monday though the pandemic had affected all sections during the last 1 year, children in the rural areas had borne the brunt because of poverty and vulnerability. Coupled with the child labor, the pandemic had brought havoc to children. Ms. Benival said at a virtual event here that the community participation at the grassroots would help eradicate child labor and extend relief to the children affected by the pandemic. Banswara-based Vajthara Group, which is working on the livelihood issues in the tribal areas, organized the event, attended by social activists and child rights volunteers. As part of the Chief Minister's Corona Bail Kalyan Yojana, the children who lost their parents will get, besides the ex gratia, 2,500 Indian rupees a month till they attain 18 years of age. Protests greet administrator in Lakshadweep residents seek Praful Patel's recall, withdrawal of the reforms. Black Day, residents of Lakshadweep Island staging a protest on Monday. Special arrangement. Special correspondent Kochi. Clad in black robes and holding black flags and placards, the islanders of Lakshadweep, locked down at their modest households on account of the raging COVID-19 pandemic, protested against the arrival of the Union Territories Administrator, Praful Patel, on Monday. The protest, which was called by the All-Party Save Lakshadweep Forum, was to demand the immediate recall of Mr. Patel and the withdrawal of the unwieldy reforms being pushed by the Union Territory Administration under his stewardship. Hundreds of islanders and those in the mainland put up posters and protest pictures on various social media platforms to express their dismay at the anti-people policies that were announced by the administration. Munir Manikfan, Village, Dweep, Panchayat Vice Chairperson at Minikoi, said in a video message that the protest was conducted to force the Union government to revoke the unilateral, draconian, anti-people, and anti-environment draft legislation and orders that were issued by Mr. Patel. In view of the protests, the police took out a route march along the streets of Kavaratti, the capital, on Sunday night, which the islanders termed as an intimidation tactic. Skips Kochi. Lok Sabha members Hibby Eden and T.N. Prathapan were planning to meet Mr. Patel, who was slated to land at the Cochin International Airport on Monday morning while in transit, to register their protest against his policies. But Mr. Patel skipped Kochi and took a special aircraft to the Agatti airstrip in Lakshadweep. Resignations continue. The spate of resignations from the BJP's Lakshadweep unit continued on Monday, with Ibrahim Thithaj, Sakath Kanbalaj, and Mohammed Kalea Logothai, President, Secretary and Treasurer of the party's Minikoi unit, quitting after finding it futile to continue due to the unfortunate current circumstances on Minikoi Island and Lakshadweep. Meanwhile, the administration extended the lockdown till June 21, on Kavaratti, Kiltan, Bitra and Minikoi Islands. Night curfew. Shops and establishments selling essential commodities will be allowed to function between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. with permission from the designated officers. There will be night curfew on all other islands. May 28 order has no link with CAA notification by Center facilitated non-Muslims to apply for citizenship. Krishnadas Rajagopal, New Delhi. The Union Home Ministry maintained in the Supreme Court on Monday that its May 28 order delegating power to collectors in 13 districts across 5 states to grant citizenship to non-Muslims from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh has no relation whatsoever with the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019. The 2019 Act, better known as CAA, is under challenge before the Supreme Court. The law is accused of fast-tracking citizenship for non-Muslim persecuted minorities Hindu, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, Parsi and Christian from the 3 neighbors. The CAA is blamed of illegally granting citizenship on the basis of religion. Petitions in the Supreme Court have drawn parallels between the CAA and the May 28 notification, which facilitates non-Muslims from the 3 countries residing in 13 districts of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Haryana, and Punjab to apply for citizenship. The Indian Union Muslim League, represented by Advocate Haris Biran, said the May 28 order was a deliberate ploy to implement the CAA's Malafide designs. The ministry countered that the May order merely delegates the power of granting citizenship by registration and naturalization to the local authorities in particular cases. The central government used its authority under Section 16 of the Citizenship Act. It is merely a process of decentralization of decision-making aimed at speedy disposal of the citizenship applications of such foreigners. It has no relation whatsoever to the CAA, the MHA affidavit said. But Mr. Biran expressed his doubts, saying if it has no relation to CAA, where does the May 28 notification draw authority from to specify the same communities for the same 3 countries for facilitating the citizenship process? The government reasoned that the notification did not provide for any relaxations to the foreigners and applies only to foreigners who have entered the country legally. The applicants should possess valid documents like passports and Indian visa. Any foreigner of any faith can apply for citizenship of India at any time, the MHA affidavit said. The government, however, said the May 28 notification was only one among numerous such orders passed in the past to meet administrative exigencies. China, India, Pakistan expanding nuclear arsenal. Number of warheads globally appears to be increasing, reversing the earlier trend, says CIPRI report. Dinkar Perry, New Delhi. China is in the middle of a significant modernization and expansion of its nuclear weapon inventory, and India and Pakistan also appear to be expanding their nuclear arsenals, according to Swedish think tank Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, CIPRI, Yearbook 2021 released on Monday. The overall number of warheads in global military stockpiles now appears to be increasing, a worrisome sign that the declining trend that has characterized global nuclear arsenals since the end of the Cold War has stalled, said Hans M. Christensen, Associate Senior Fellow with CIPRI's Nuclear Disarmament, Arms Control, and Non-Proliferation Program. According to the yearbook, India possessed an estimated 156 nuclear warheads at the start of 2021, compared with 150 at the start of last year, while Pakistan had 165 warheads, up from 160 in 2020. China's nuclear arsenal consisted of 350 warheads, up from 320 at the start of 2020. The 9 nuclear-armed states, the US, Russia, the UK, France, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea together possessed an estimated 13,080 nuclear weapons at the start of 2021. Russia and the US together possessed over 90% of global nuclear weapons, SIPRI said. IISS report. A report by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, London, in May titled Nuclear Deterrence and Stability in South Asia, Perceptions and Realities said that chance played an important ameliorative role in the India-Pakistan crisis of February 2019 and the two countries risk stumbling into using their nuclear weapons through miscalculation or misinterpretation in a future crisis. India and Pakistan are seeking new technologies and capabilities that dangerously undermine each other's defense under the nuclear threshold, said the report. It said China's evolving profile as a nuclear weapons state was compounding India's security challenges. Indian labs widen net for a mutant form of Delta variant. It allows the virus to escape antibodies, similar to virulent South African variant. Spreading the net, a health worker conducting a COVID-19 test in New Delhi on Monday. Sushil Kumar Verma. Jacob Kashi, New Delhi. An emerging form of the Delta variant that allows the coronavirus to escape antibodies, in recently approved treatment regimes, is appearing on the radar of Indian scientists. 5 Indian labs have submitted data on this modified variant in May and June to GISAID, a global repository of coronavirus variants. Public Health England, PHE, a United Kingdom body, has also stated that of the 63 genomes in its repository as of June 7, 6 were from India. This does not, however, mean that only 6 instances of this form of the virus exist in India. Evidence of the mutant have been found in Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Telangana, and Karnataka. Called I1 or B.1.617.2.1, it is a variant of Delta, B.1.617.2, but with a mutation called K417N, which has previously been identified in the Beta variant first identified in South Africa. This is an international variant of concern, VOC, marked by being highly infectious and significantly able to reduce the potency of vaccines. It has all the mutations that make the Delta variant, along with an additional concerning one with the South African variant, said Shahid Jamil, former advisor to the Indian SARS-CoV-2 Genomic Consortium, INSACOG. It is indeed a matter of concern, and we should be sequencing more to identify how widely prevalent it is in India. The Delta variant is now regarded as the most prevalent variant in India, comprising nearly 31% of the 21,000 community samples processed until late May. The ICMR National Institute of Virology and the CSIR Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, Hyderabad, have conducted laboratory tests to determine the potency of Covishield and Covaxin against the new variant. While antibodies continued to be produced against the variant, they were fewer than against the strain used by the vaccine companies to prepare their vaccines. However, antibody levels are not the only markers of immunity. An additional concern with the K417N mutation, according to a database of the CSIR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, CSIR-IGIB, was that it was associated with resistance to a newly developed monoclonal antibody treatment drug, Casirivimab and Imduvimab, for treating those with moderate and severe disease, but at high risk. Marketed by Roche and Cipla in India, the drug was recently approved by India's Central Drug Standards and Control Organization. The price for each patient dose, a combined dose of 1,200 mg, 600 mg of Casirivimab and 600 mg of Imduvimab, will be 59,750 Indian rupees inclusive of all taxes, a statement said. Anurag Agrawal, Director, CSIR-IGIB, New Delhi, however, said as of now, the AYI was just something to keep track of. A report from PHE on June 11 said that of the 36 identified cases of the I1 in the UK, 27 occurred in those who had taken at least one dose of vaccine. There were no deaths reported so far among the 36 cases. India reports 58,463 cases, 2,698 new deaths recorded, 14.99 lakh vaccine doses given. Special correspondent Chennai. India recorded 58,463 new COVID-19 cases and 2,698 new deaths till 9:30 p.m. on Monday. The country has so far reported a total of 2,95,68,540 cases and 3,77,027 deaths. Tamil Nadu reported 12,772 new infections, followed by Maharashtra, 8,129, and Kerala, 7,719. Maharashtra recorded 1,592 new fatalities, followed by Tamil Nadu, 254, and Kerala, 161. Maharashtra's fatalities include backlog deaths, which were missed in the previous reports. The figures do not include cases and deaths from Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Tripura, and Ladakh. The data are sourced from the respective states' health bulletins. Nearly 14.92 lakh samples were tested in the country on Sunday, the results for which were made available on Monday. Nearly 14.99 lakh vaccine doses were administered in the country in the 24 hours ending 7 a.m. on Monday, which is 19.84 lakh doses fewer than what was recorded in the previous 24 hours. It is also 1.08 lakh doses more than what was recorded during the corresponding period a week ago. The 7-day rolling average of daily vaccinations in the country continues to increase. It stood at 30.03 lakh on June 13, which is more than the 26.96 lakh recorded a week before, June 6. At least one dose. About 21.1% of adults in India, 42.5% of those aged above 45 and 46.1% of persons aged above 60 have been administered at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine until 8 p.m. on Monday. While 15.2% of the country's population has received at least one dose, only 3.5% are fully vaccinated. The figures are based on the estimated population in 2021. The share of fully vaccinated persons in comparable economies such as Brazil and Russia are 11.12% and 9.81%, respectively. India continued to record the highest number of 7-day average daily deaths in the world, with 3,588 deaths on June 13. The two countries with the highest fatality count after India were Brazil, 2,000, and Argentina, 590. Nearly 33% of the world's new deaths were recorded in India on June 13. Center lists food schemes for migrants, laborers, states responsible for distribution, government. The SC had asked for details on how food will reach migrants without cards. Raman Krishnaji. Legal correspondent, New Delhi. The center on Monday informed the Supreme Court that the states and the Union territories have purchased nearly 3.7 lakh tons of food grains at concessional rates from the Food Corporation of India this year to supply to migrants without ration cards and others outside the protective cover of the National Food Security Act, NFSA, debunking apprehensions raised in court that those without ration cards may be left to die amid a devastating pandemic. The Supreme Court had asked the center to explain how food will reach migrant laborers without ration cards. The center has placed on record details of its schemes to feed migrants, the poor and the badly affected in the public health crisis. Besides the purchase of grains by the states and the UTs under the Open Market Sales Scheme, OMSS, in 2021-22, the center said, NGOs and charitable organizations had purchased 421 tons of food commodities. NGOs run kitchens for supply of cooked food to non-card migrants, the center, represented by Additional Solicitor General Aishwarya Bhatti, said in written submissions in the court. However, the responsibility to distribute food grains lies with the states, it noted. Union of India is committed to making sufficient food grains available to the states at highly subsidized prices under the above schemes, to tide over the difficulty of food security during the current crisis. However, the responsibility of identification and distribution to the beneficiaries lies with the state/UTs, it submitted. The center also said it had written twice to the state/UTs on May 20th and May 25th advising them to avail their requirements of food grains under the schemes and to provide food grains to those not covered under the National Food Security Act. Thank you. International news. A year on, unanswered questions on Galwan clash. China's accounts reveal few details that appear aimed at conveying a carefully crafted message to the domestic audience. Trouble spot. A satellite image taken in May 2020 shows a PLA camp in the Galwan Valley. Maxar Technologies/AP. Ananth Krishnan. A year after the June 15, 2020 clash in the Galwan Valley, China's official accounts of what led to the worst violence on the India-China border since 1967 still leave many questions unanswered, revealing few and selective details that appear aimed at conveying a carefully crafted message to the domestic audience. While Chinese officials have said repeatedly in recent months the rights and wrongs are clear of what led to the lack tensions, Indian officials say Beijing is, in fact, yet to provide any clarity or credible explanation of its actions last year, starting with mobilizing a large number of troops in April following annual military exercises and deploying them close to the lac, not just in Galwan Valley. That mobilization in April, coming at a time when India had to delay its own summer exercises because of the COVID-19 outbreak, is one of several key missing details in China's official accounts so far. A reading of all of China's public statements issued in the year since the Galwan clash underlines a twofold approach in Beijing's messaging, a focus only on the Galwan Valley with little to no mention of the other troubled spots on the lac, where PLA transgressions led to multiple standoffs, and since February this year, a more proactive propaganda effort aimed at emphasizing the bravery of China's troops in Galwan and portraying Beijing not as the aggressor, but as defending its sovereignty. Since this year, China has also firmly clamped down on any questioning of the official narrative. Earlier this month, Chinese authorities sentenced Qiu Ziming, one of at least half a dozen people who have been detained over comments on Galwan, to 8 months in prison for defaming martyrs. Mr. Qiu had questioned why India had promptly recognized the loss of 20 Indian soldiers in Galwan Valley, but China was yet to fully reveal casualties, with the first announcement of honors coming only 8 months later. Sparse details. In the past year, China has issued 2 detailed statements on the lac, a step-by-step account from the Foreign Ministry on June 19, 2020 and accounts in February 2021 published in the official PLA Daily after the Chinese government revealed it had suffered casualties as it announced military honors for 5 soldiers, 4 of them recognized posthumously. The first Chinese account of tensions came in the Communist Party-run Global Times on May 18, which said Chinese troops had bolstered border control measures and made necessary moves in response to India's recent illegal construction of defense facilities across the border into Chinese territory in the Galwan Valley region. The June 19 statement from the Chinese government said since April, the Indian border troops have unilaterally and continuously built roads, bridges, and other facilities at the lac in the Galwan Valley. It referred to the early morning of May 6 as the start of more serious tensions, alleging the Indian troops had crossed the lac by night. Indian officials said the reverse had happened, that Indian troops had since April been prevented from reaching patrolling point 14, which they go up to every summer, and that construction of facilities had taken place on India's side of PP-14. Satellite images later released suggested the June 15 clash had happened near PP-14. Most Indian patrolling points lie short of the lac on India's side. Video release. In February, the announcement of military honors for 5 soldiers was accompanied by the release of a video on Chinese state media from Galwan Valley. The video clips, which triggered an outpouring of anger in China, showed Indian soldiers crossing the river and Chinese troops holding their ground. The message was to show India as the aggressor, which is the widely prevailing view in China. Left unsaid was the context of the video, in which Indian troops were trying to push back Chinese troops who had come up to PP-14. On June 11, in the lead-up to the 1-year anniversary of the clash, which also comes just 2 weeks before China is planning a major military parade to mark the centenary of the Communist Party on July 1, state broadcaster CCTV interviewed Chief Fabio, the regimental commander who was among the 5 honored in February. Mr. Chi spoke at a military meeting, appearing with the scar on his head clearly seen, the Global Times reported. Chen Hongjun, one of the 4 soldiers who was named as being killed in the clash, will be among 29 people honored with a medal on the July 1st anniversary. The continued focus on Galwan, while the still unresolved tensions in Dapsang, Dumkak, Gagra and Hot Springs, remain almost entirely ignored in the coverage, is one key element of the broader messaging effort, as acknowledging multiple standoffs, as well as the fact that it is India and not China that is demanding a return to status quo in the slow-moving negotiations, would undermine the Chinese military's central claim of not being the aggressor. At NATO meet, Biden vows to defend Europe. He calls it a sacred obligation of U.S. Joe Biden. Reuters. Brussels. U.S. President Joe Biden told fellow NATO leaders on Monday the defense of Europe, Turkey, and Canada was a sacred obligation for the United States, a marked shift from his predecessor Donald Trump's threats to withdraw from the military alliance. Arriving in Brussels from the weekend's G7 summit in England, Mr. Biden again sought to rally Western allies to support a U.S. strategy to contain China's military rise as well as showing unity in the face of Russian aggression. Article 5 is a sacred obligation, Mr. Biden said, referring to the Transatlantic Alliance's collective defense pledge. "I want all Europe to know that the U.S. is there," he said after arriving in his black presidential limousine. "NATO is critically important to us," said Mr. Biden, who is seeking to mend ties after Mr. Trump's denigration of the nuclear-armed alliance over the past 4 years and what Mr. Trump said were its delinquent members. Allies are expected to brand China a security risk to the Western alliance for the first time, a day after the Group of 7 rich nations issued a statement on human rights in China and Taiwan that Beijing said slandered its reputation. Mr. Biden said both Russia and China were not acting in a way that is consistent with what we had hoped, referring to Western efforts since the mid-1990s to bring both countries into the fold of liberal democracies. The reign of Bibi is over, for now the ousted leader has vowed to topple the dangerous new government of PM Benjamin Netanyahu. Stanley Johnny. Supporters call him King Bibi of Israel. Detractors deride his right-wing politics, polarizing leadership, and bellicose foreign policy. But Benjamin Netanyahu has been a domineering presence in Israel's politics for more than